Welcome everyone to the No Pressure PDA podcast. This is my official launch. A couple things up front I want to share with you. First of all, I'm coming down with some kind of sickness, so I'm a little bit out of it right now, but I was tired of procrastinating on this project. So there comes a point where my PDA, if I avoid anything too much longer, the pressure builds in me not doing it. So I was crossing that threshold. So slightly sick or not slightly sick, I'm all in at this point. So another thing I want to share is that I am trying to offer my content in as many formats as possible. In this case, I have the podcast version, which is the long version of my recording, and then I'm also having a video portion. Some of you might be watching. That's going to be on my YouTube channel, where I try to break up the content of the podcast into topical segments so that people can watch shorter videos, for those of you who don't like the long things. Sometimes I'll even, if I have something specific I'm going to be talking about, I might also do a reel just to give little segments of things. I also have my blog, so and my Facebook page and Twitter and etc. So I do try my best to kind of disseminate anything I talk about into multiple formats so that as many people as possible can access them. So what am I going to be talking about, though? That's what I'm going to be talking about. What is the point of this podcast? Why did I create it? Why have I been looking forward to it and also terrified of it? So today I'll break that up into 2 or 3 segments. We'll kind of see how it goes. But basically, I want to introduce myself, tell everyone a little bit about me, and then I also wanted to share my journey just with PDA, not just me discovering that I was PDA. That's kind of something I've already covered on my YouTube channel. I have a video like right there in the beginning. My very first video was me kind of sharing my processing of not only my PDA, but my autism diagnosis. I wanted more for this podcast to talk about my life and how PDA and autism and ADHD, just how all my diagnoses have impacted my lifestyle. So that's the first thing I want to cover. Or no, that's the second thing I want to cover. The first thing I was going to cover was just kind of my stats, I guess, and my interest and what got me into this. Second, I'm going to talk about how PDA has impacted my life. So the third thing I was going to talk about was just going over pathological demand avoidance. What is it? How is it different from any other type of demand avoidance that's out there? Kind of a brief touch on that base for those of you who aren't familiar with it. For those of you who think the letters PDA and think about, public displays of affection, kind of answering that question. Again, I apologize if I am kind of loopy. I'm going to try to not drag on and on and on. Okay, so jumping in. Who am I? What are my experiences? For starters, I'm a 37-year-old mother of 3 boys. They are 10 years old, 8 years old, and 4 years old. All 3 of them I believe to be PDA autistic. The youngest is the only one I don't think in our household who is not ADHD. All the rest of us, definitely ADHD. I guess I would say about me, I didn't do very well in school growing up, which is typical for people with our neurotype. We all kind of struggle to find our way, and as to be expected, I struggled especially with the demands of, like, say, doing homework, going to class, attendance, sleep. Like, I struggled with all those things. It wasn't until we moved from Oregon to Idaho. I was 17 years old, And I decided at that time to repeat my uh, junior year of high school. I did that for two reasons. One was that I felt like up until that point, I hadn't taken school very seriously. I kind of put the blame on myself that I just wasn't trying hard enough. Um, Another reason was that, moving from a whole other state to another state, I was, you know, almost going to graduate. So I just felt like, why don't I give myself a chance to make some friends? And I'm really glad I did. I'm very glad I did that for two reasons. One, I did find a way to make school work for me. I didn't know it at the time, but I kind of hacked my PDA avoidance by me choosing to repeat my junior year was me taking control of my education. So I feel like that was really a big deal there. I was choosing to take school seriously. I made a major decision involving that. That kind of helped me feel like it was in my hands. And my friendships I made some really good friends. I'm still friends with most of them today. So, yeah, pretty much all of them. I also got to be involved in drama, which was one of my favorite classes. That's the only thing I'm kind of sad about with my kids. I'm going to have to see if I can get them involved in like a local theater thing, because if they want to. I do feel like some of them are pretty theatrical. So, but those were some of the best memories I had in high school was drama and choir. My kids are homeschooled. That's why I mentioned that I don't want them to miss out on all the aspects of public school. I also became a Christian my senior year. And I'm mentioning that mainly because that was the first time. I had special interests when I was young. I was really into grass. I'm not joking. I wanted Kentucky bluegrass for my lawn. I already knew what kind of lawn I wanted when I grew up. I was really into animals, really into fish. I used to hang out at the pet store and educate everybody on the different types of fish. I remember irritating the employees at the pet store. But I had a blast, and I got to hang out there while my mom did oil painting classes. So I did have special interests, but for me, faith and faith was never really pushed on me. My parents were both Christian, but my mom was not strict about attendance. And my dad, I would go with him. I would go to church with him, but he was really relaxed about it. He never put pressure on me to participate in anything I didn't want to. In fact, again, some of my best memories at church were that I used to go play in the girls' bathroom with my friends. And we didn't sit for service, we just hung out and had fun. So I never really had any kind of hang up around the topic of religion. So when I started to get to know this one girl that I was working with, it was my job. I was working at Papa Murphy's. Her and I seemingly didn't have much of anything in common. She grew up homeschooled, very religious. She came in there different, and me, I'm kind of, I was probably a jerk to her too. I think I was a jerk. She told me later, but me being me, I'm pretty open to getting to know people and like hearing them out. And so she started sharing things with me. And then around that same time, I was going through a crisis of my own. And that crisis was that I had trouble my whole life with the opposite sex, with dating. I would get infatuated with men. This is kind of jumbling, touching on my experiences with PDA, but so be it. So, a trait, one of the possible traits of PDA is people focus, and that's definitely a thing for me. So, just like an autistic person could have a focus on objects like my bluegrass or plants or whatever it is, we can also have a focus on people and almost obsessive like quality. So I constantly was developing these infatuations and that would go nowhere. I hadn't even kissed, I think I kissed a boy like a peck, like a peck on the lips kind of kiss when I was pretty young. But I didn't have a real kiss until I was 18. And that's when I realized, when I was dating him, I had no idea what I was doing. Like, nothing. I felt completely lost as far as how to communicate, how to be myself. I felt like I didn't even know who I was in the relationship. And these weren't traits that I feel like were his fault at all. Like, he was not, a bad boyfriend at all. It's just, I didn't know who I was. And it felt so just disorienting to be lost like that. And so when this girl at work started asking me questions about religion, and I was very vague in my beliefs, that sparked an interest for me. So I was asking lots and lots of questions, and she was there for me. And so it would just questions. And anyway, long story longer. I wasn't meaning to necessarily talk about that all that much, but I developed an extreme passion for my Christian faith. That being said, it wasn't like I was very aware of the flaws within Christianity, especially what I consider still flaws. What I was going through, I felt, was different than, like, say, political Christianity or mainstream Christianity in certain ways. So anyway, I became very passionate about it. Definitely made some mistakes in that journey, but I was reading a lot. I was just fascinated with, again, disseminating information about it. I was kind of what we would call, not mentorship, discipleship. So discipleship within the Christian faith is more of a relationship-based, teaching, kind of like a mentorship. I was very much into that, and met some of my best friends that way. I went to a Bible college for a couple years. I found that it wasn't quite a fit for me, the school that I went to. And so then I went to an online college to finish my bachelor's in religious studies. That school was awesome. I was Regent University. I think they're still a good school. So, and I also got married around, I think shortly after I got my bachelor's was when I met my spouse and we got married. And after marriage, I don't know. It's like I didn't expect, I guess, my focus to shift again, or my ability to keep up with things to change. It's, to me, I did really well in school. I'm a good reader. Like, it fit me. And so my weaknesses were not evident at all during this time when I was single, when I was, going to school and it was my choice. I had freedom and flexibility. I did struggle with certain things, like the jobs that I tried to take on while I was going to school. I did have struggles, but basically I was like killing it at life. And when we got married and then we started having kids, that's for me when some of these, like, cracks started to appear for me. I think it was then I kind of had to reevaluate, what am I doing? What direction am I going here? I did have an opportunity to get my master's degree. So I got my master's degree in human services counseling. And then after that, I just realized I can't keep going. Like, I wanted to get my doctorates in religious studies. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to teach. And it just, I got advice from close friends that, that were professors, and that it's not the same world anymore. It's hard to get a job as a professor, as a tenured professor. It's very difficult. And that's, the case nowadays. It's very expensive and it's very difficult to get your foot in that door. And I also wanted a family. So I wanted to grow my family. So I kind of felt like I had to suddenly now choose which direction I was going. And I felt pulled in a lot of directions. But kind of out of that, like identity crisis, I developed then my interest, my people-centered interest through religious studies, then shifted into kind of a people-centered interest in like psychology and a budding interest in trauma. I found myself repeatedly drawn to people who were struggling in some way, and I felt most comfortable with people who were just kind of lost, I guess. Like, I felt lost, and I related to that feeling of feeling lost. And so if I ran across someone else, I just had a gift, I guess, for reaching people that were very difficult to reach, and trying to provide comfort and some guidance, like together, like maybe we could find some guidance and some direction together. Outside of all that, I've always had interest in art. I've always had interest in, kind of on the side, like my artistic skills. But always it's been people. So along the way, especially as I had more kids, kind of talk more about that in a second. That's going to play into my personal journey with really realizing how that something was going on with me that was different than what most people were experiencing. I guess outside of that, I've always kind of tried to discover, well, what is it? What can I do? And I would try this thing or that thing or whatever. And like I said, some of that would involve art or pets or animals or something. I loved animals. I still do. So what has that meant for what I'm doing here? Basically, I feel like No Pressure PDA, when I started doing this page, it's brought all these skills together that I have struggled to find a use for. And I'll say, though, this part of my journey, part of my personal journey, spiritually and professionally, has been to not place so much importance on usefulness. I feel like usefulness is a soul killer. I definitely believe that even if I didn't have this page to work on or whatever, that my gifts would be used in some way just for enjoyment, just for the pleasure of living. So I took a lot of pressure off myself there, I think, when I realized that about I don't need to monetize my identity. And so here we are, though. I am kind of branching into that area very tentatively. I'm not driven by money, but it's like I am trying to do this thing that's a little more structured, and I have taken my time with it because I'm learning myself more now, which leads me to my part 2.